Good afternoon, this is Shirley with Spirit of Matter, and apparently this is Saturn Day with Saturn Hour, which I find very interesting because it's 12:46 and I don't know how come. It's the 8th hour of the day and I'm doing this again and I'm still receiving Saturn Hour. So, very interesting. I don't know. Maybe it was shining really early. Maybe they didn't change the clock. But the ascendant is Saturn ruled in 18 degrees Aquarius and the Saturn in the second house, 0 degrees Pisces direct. Moon is in the first degree of Leo, separating from opposition to Pluto and in conjuncting the ascendant, the Saturn. Midheaven, 11th house, 2 degrees Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter in the 4th house in Taurus, 10 degrees Taurus. So, Venus is still very tightly opposing Neptune. So, myths to do with Venus are appropriate and myths are appropriate. But this is actually an episode about Uranus and a little timeless teaching about Uranus. So, when we look at the planet in astrology, if we have the discovery for recent planets and asteroids like the outer planets and asteroids, new asteroids, then we have the time of discovery, we have how was it discovered. So when we talked about Aries, we talked about, thinking that Pluto is not a planet because Aries is bigger and she cannot be a planet, and the whole, and how it pertains to who Aries is. With Uranus, we also have such a story. So this is the natal chart of the person who discovered Uranus, who is called William Herschel. But William Herschel was the first person to have discovered a planet, or at least in modern times. And he named it after the king that was ruling his kingdom, the kingdom he lived in, which was King George. What is surprising is that this would be the King George that the United States would have its independence war to separate from. And so Uranus does mark revolutions and changes, and outthrowing of something. So he was named Planet George before he was named Uranus. It also has a very weird name because if you pronounce it Uranus, then you perhaps saying something inappropriate. So Uranus is also associated with defying what we call a certain etiquette or a certain standard or a certain royalty or kingdom or leadership. So yeah, but another very interesting thing about Uranus is that it's a very cold planet, and it is believed, it's a gas giant, it is believed to have had whether it was a comet or something colliding into it many eras ago. And because of this collision, basically a shock, that turned Uranus on its side. It tilted Uranus on its side. It took it, the heat of the planet evaporated, and it began to tilt on its side. And basically, its own passage surrounding the sun is like a silly walk. Okay, so there was this shock that causes the loss of heat. And also the loss of density, okay? It is a gas giant. Okay, so now it's cooler. And the way that the planet simply tilts is unusual. So the keywords of shock, something unusual, and becoming unusual due to a shock, okay? And I called it the silly walk. Because That literally is the movement of the planet right now. And indeed, we see Uranus associated with a shock. It's usually fated, something unexpected, that it changes the way you walk, basically. I'm getting, now that Uranus is in Taurus, so there's this song by Michael Jackson, I think. It's kind of like, you came and changed the way I walk, the way I talk. I cannot explain, okay? So this can also be a shock that is not necessarily a negative one, okay? There's something fate that happens in a way that is shocking, and that changes basically the way you walk in the world. It can be in a very literal sense, or it can mean your life path. And we know that Uranus transits or Uranus connections are very associated with this. There is something that's like a shocking discovery. Okay, it can be unfortunate, but it can also be fortunate. Okay, something sudden that tells you that unbalances you and changes the center of your gravity in a very literal way, and after which something is being liberated. Something in you even is being liberated. So it can be a certain shocking event that you went through, and after this, you're not the same person. If you were hiding or oppressing certain things inside you, they're being liberated. And so we see that planet George was basically named after the king that United States would later have the independence war from. Okay, so it was the person that it was named after would be the recipient of this rebellion. He was oppressing a certain thing, and it was to do with debt. Okay, with taxation, with debt. He was put in too much taxation, too much debt, and people needed to be criminals to survive. So they became criminals, and they had an alternative, another country that later would do the same thing. But at the beginning, it was a bit of an alternative. Here, you don't have to pay taxes in the beginning. Okay, one of the first things that they changed was regarding taxation. But there was this new entity like, no, you will not have debt here. You will not have an oppressive regime that doesn't allow you to own land and to own property. And not only that, we will allow people to shoot their government. Okay? Invoke the second. It's the Second Amendment. It's allowing the civilians to carry guns. And that was the story for the United States, very associated with the name of Uranus. And at the time of the birth of the person who discovered Uranus, it was in Capricorn. But how do I say? Well, we talked about the silly walk. We talked about that there is a certain shock to the system. We talked about the liberation. Okay. That's associated with this shock. What happens when you tilt yourself? Okay, try to walk. If you do the silly walk, it's not just that you do something weird with your legs. Okay, there is a shift in perspective that happens due to this. And this shift is in perspective that happens following the certain shock is what is most associated with Uranus transits. Okay, you see the world from another point of view. If people look straight, you look to the side. And it is your different perspective, and it happened by a shock, by a fated event, that caused you to look at the world, to be unusual, and to see the world from an unusual vantage point. And so from where you are, You see things differently. And this is a part of what Uranus does, or Uranus transits do. From where you are, you see things differently. But it can also be associated even with a certain type of disability. Even with a certain type of disability. And so you are unusual, and so you look at the world, and what you experience in the world is a different experience, and you become a bit detached, which is also the result of a shock. And you have something unique to offer this world, which stems from you. Now, because the experience of Uranus was the experience of a shock that caused evaporation of heat, okay? To become more detached, and you walk your way, whether it's because of a disability or, and it's true, you cannot do the usual after this in regards to this area in your life where Uranus hits. Okay, so let's say in this chart, in Herschel's chart, yes, Uranus was in the 5th house, and that means that anything pertaining to the 5th house, whether it's his hobby, whether it's gambling, whether it's what he does for fun, whether it's children, would be forcibly done in a very unique way. And now you can look at Uranus in your chart. Let's say you have Uranus in the 1st house. Uranus in the 1st house, there can be something usual about the way you look. But it can also be your actual silly walk. And this can also be your life path. You have an unusual path, maybe a bit of a rebel. But it doesn't mean you cannot be tyrannical yourself, okay? It just means that you're forced to do something. Your constitution, literally your constitution, has received a certain shock, and you're forced to do something differently. Okay? Uranus in the 2nd house, how you make money, what you spend money on, and your values are forcibly different. What others do doesn't work for you, and whenever something triggers this Uranus, or whenever you have a 2nd house perfection, you will need to go about it in a roundabout way, in a bit. You need to have a little bit of a silly walk when it comes to making money, and when it comes to spending money, and when it comes to sorting out what are your values and acting according to your values. 3rd house, communication. So there's something here, you could have even a learning disability, but a type of learning disability that forces you, in order to, let's say, to read something, then you would need to do something that causes you to look at things differently. Or maybe in order to make certain calculations, you would need to put letters instead of words. I knew some people that would have no problems to make calculations with letters, okay, with mathematical objects, but not with numbers or with integers. And this is a sort of disability, but it forces you to look at things, and now you will not see an equation again, because when you see 1 plus 3 equals 4, and when you see y plus x equals z, and you can only sort it with y plus x equals z, so now you're not only see 1 plus 3 equals 4, you're seeing all the many ways in which y plus x equals z. And now you're seeing a pattern. And so when it comes to your learning and to your communication, you are going to be doing things differently, and it doesn't make you any less intelligent. It just forcibly makes you learn things that people don't pay attention to. Because if you constantly solving equations by having numbers in them, then you don't understand the constants of nature. And if you can only look at letters, then you must, then the only ways in which y plus x would be equal z is because if there is a constant, that it is true. Okay, there has to be a world where y plus z equals 3, and you cannot express this word in numbers, so now you have to express it in other things. And so you have to decide what is y, what is z, what is x, what is z, but it cannot be numbers, so it can be velocity and temperature and I don't know, a pressure. And now you discover the relation between things, but you cannot call them in numbers, you must call them in names. And now you can only do math if you're actually applying it to the world of phenomena. Okay? That is one thing that can happen with third house. So communication is weird in a way, and it can be shocking to people, because until you try to, if they try to see what you see, you can only see that. What they see is difficult for you to see, but if you try to explain to them, they either will say, oh my God, you are a genius, or what are you talking about? It's so complicated, I don't understand. It was like, but come on, you're doing the same thing, but with your numbers. What if 1 was the weather? 1 is an integer, it's not the weather. Then let's say this 1 is what you call 1, I call y, then this is the weather. And x was a level of intricacy of a system, okay, level of complexity of a system. You say, but this is the number 3. Okay, what if 3 was level of complexity? You say number, okay, but you could say that this 3 is equal the level of complexity of a system. And then you say x could be temperature. So the temperature changes the levels of complexity of the system. And let's say one weather, instead of weather, we say pressure. Oh, but it doesn't work in this way. Then you have to put pressure where the x is. And I have temperature, and it's relation to the level of complexity of the system. And that is, and you just do it with 1, 3, and 4. Okay, because this is how you would think if you would be doing Uranus, whereas when you're just doing what everybody does, then you're looking at what everybody does and you're learning, but you're learning in a very specific path where Uranus forcibly takes you in the, let's say that this happened to you because of a certain shock, maybe even a neural shock to your brain. Okay, you got something in the head or something in the nervous system, and because of this shock, you have this different pattern of communicating or learning, and this can pertain to your business, okay, because then you have to find a way to make a living, so it has to be different, and your daily routines. This is third house. It can also be your siblings, so it can be that it's not you, but you have a brother or a sister that are experiencing some shock happened to them. And ever since then, okay, maybe they have weird accents like me. I don't think I have the foreign language syndrome, because foreign language usually is fixed, like you would have one, and my accent is constantly changing, constantly. Sometimes it's what I think about, sometimes it's different to others, sometimes I like what others, and I'm always afraid they will think I'm imitating them when this happens, but it's not true, okay? For me, I have Chiron with Mercury, but it's a different thing. But Uranus can also give that. Fourth house, your home life and your actual home. Okay, so due to a shock, your home life is unusual. Maybe you are living in a place where everybody is monogamous, but you were born to a threesome. Okay, not a threesome of children, or it can also be, but a threesome of, three parents. That two of them were like involved in the biological thing of giving birth to you, but you are being raised by 3 caregivers. Or you're living in a village where everybody is polyamorous and the child is the child of the community and it takes a village to raise a child, but your parents decided to be a monogamous couple within this community, okay? This is Uranus, but it's also the house where you live in. There's something unusual about the house that you live in or your homeland. Okay, maybe you are the first child of people who went to space and decided to give birth to a baby there. And you're the baby and you're living in a spaceship, literally. But in a less extreme case, there's something unusual about the motherland or the land of origin that you live in. So your house, your home life, and ancestry, and the land that you live in. Uranus can be associated with technology, okay, because when we need to solve a problem, we just have a shock, and you need to solve a problem, and there are things you cannot do. Usually you would need help, and this help would be invention, okay, then you get the technology thing. For example, astrology. I began to look at astrology when Uranus was ingressing into my third house, and I was like, I'm unmeetable. Okay, if you saw before that in the beginning, then I was able to actually do a podcast about astrology and invite guests, but then I became unmeetable and unschedulable. And so I began to look at the astrology, and I began to look at what is the chart, why am I talking about this, why am I talking about that? But it came from necessity. It came from the fact that I cannot do an ordinary job where I have to keep a schedule. I just cannot. And it forces me to liberate myself in another way. So I'll be very attuned. And why am I thinking about this now? Let's look at the chart, and I will delineate my thoughts and stuff like that. But this is more third house. Yeah, fourth house is technology or astrology that you're using for your home because you need to solve certain problems. Again, it can be also during, it doesn't have to be disability, but it can be a certain type of, let's say you need to clean your house and it's very difficult for you to clean your house. You're like, yeah, but I'm much more interested in building a robot that would do that instead. And you build a robot that will do that instead. Or you try to build this robot and your parent just bought a robot, an iRobot, and you have all this technology around your house, or you have a smart home. And that is just, it's not a bug, it's a feature, okay? Fifth house. So fifth house is children, fertility, what you do for fun, creative projects. Yeah, your first child, I said that. So this can mean that both as a child, you might have had an unusual childhood experience, okay? And it can be that your first child, also there would be something unusual about the child itself or the birth of the child. Sometimes it signifies stuff like IVF or technology involved with birth, but not always, not at all. I wouldn't necessarily say that. Just means that there's going to be something unusual, and yes, it can have to do with shock because it's Uranus. So when Uranus is triggered, there can be like a shocking discovery or a trauma. Okay, it is also a planet that can bring something that is trauma. It's very sudden and unexpected. So, but the result is liberation of something. So if it is what you do for fun, you may have affairs that are sudden. You might be a part of the people to whom your partner comes to me and says, is this my twin flame? Because let's say you were married and then you are attracted to someone and it's sudden. And you just find yourself, oh, something happened and I don't know what to do. Or maybe you would come to me and say, I don't know, something happened. I cheated on my spouse and I would never think that I would do such a thing. And I go to you, and I will tell you, how did you met your spouse? Oh, surely it was one sudden day. I wasn't even expecting this. And then I'm sitting and I'm seeing this person, and maybe there will be some technology involved around this, or an expo show, or even astrology. Okay, and you say, it was so sudden, but I couldn't resist that. And you say, why are you surprised that when something comes to your fifth house and activates, it also happens so suddenly, you cannot resist that? But I am married. Okay, we will need to think what is happening there, because, and then you could suddenly cut me in my speech and say, you know what? Now that we are speaking, before I met my wife, I remember I was studying engineering, but then she came and she was doing astrology back then. She was doing astrology, and you know what? In secret, we started to do stuff like elections for when is good to launch a product, and this was working very well for my company, but we kept it secret. And then I said, okay, what is up with the new partner? You know, this new partner, she won't let me keep anything secret. Anything that I do, she said, you want to help me with my job, it's no problem, but I have to say to people how I do it, because I want also other people to do it, and I want maybe to teach them how to do it. And she won't let me anything to do with my patents, she won't let me keep secret. And I was keeping my patents secret all the time. I say, aha. This is Uranus. This is Uranus. And it can also have to do with fertility. Maybe you were trying to have a child and you kept secret your originality, and now you met someone who forces you. In this case, you could also be pregnant outside of marriage, because you were oppressing something, because you went about it the usual way, and now this creativity needs to be out. Uranus is taking anything heated out, but it's by a shock, and you don't walk straight later. Okay, you have to go about it in a bit of a silly walk, and it is eccentric. If you are introvert, Uranus is more difficult for you because it causes you to be more eccentric. I am a person that could be even traditional. I have Saturn in my 9th house, but look at my voice. My voice is constantly thinking, speaking my accents constantly. If I try to speak to a crowd, and mind you, I have Venus in the 3rd house and Sun in the 3rd house, what am I to do but speak? Then I constantly have weird accents. I have to just radically accept myself, and then I can do my job, and it is liberating. Because otherwise I would have this Saturn in my 9th house. It's very traditional, it's very, although it's retrograde, but it's traditional, okay? It's the usual. It has a straight line that it thinks in, and that's it. But with Uranus, I'm forced to have, through my voice even, to have radical acceptance. And so here, 5th house, what you do for fun, your first child, romance, and also if you have types of like gambling or stuff like that, it's very difficult. If you need to repress something, it's very difficult, because it can be fun, and like in affairs, it's one of the signs of having the dating phase, but also affairs, then it can be problematic, and it would radicalize. You have to do radical acceptance with this, because you will not be able to hide with Uranus. 6th house. So 6th house can be pets. You know, at the time where they were raising the Tamagotchis, I never had a Tamagotchi because I was afraid that I would not feed it. But I had pets. So if you think about the Tamagotchi as a pet, this is very Uranus 6th. Although a bit Mercury, because it was tiny, it was small. But there's something like this. Okay, so 6th house is pets. It's your service to the world. It's also your physical health. So there are certain people, it can be so much so that the person has something attached to their body. There's certain technology that they use, maybe whether it's for digestion or it's for speech or whatnot. But it doesn't have to be. It can literally mean that the way that the person maintains their physical health either has to do with technology, in the sense of like this type of vitamins that absorb it that way, or the way that they raise their food. They have a technology to raising their food, but it's also how you give service to the world. So when you are of service, okay, it doesn't necessarily mean work, although it's one of the workplaces where you are employed or have employees. then you might want to use certain technologies that you will be forced to use because they answer a particular need. Here is just something you won't be able to do the way other people do it. There's something unusual about this. Also, if you have a pet, there's something unusual about the way you care for your pet, or you have an unusual pet. That can also be the case. And unusual is relative, you know. If you have a dog where everybody has cats, you are unusual. But it can also be those type of pets that can be shocking to people because Uranus is shocked. Or maybe you are afraid of Scorpios, and then one day you discovered a Scorpio in your house, and you decided to make it your pet, and you faced your fears in that way. And this was, let's say Uranus in the 6th house in Scorpio, and Scorpio becomes your pet. So can also be enemies, and in this case, while your enemies could be using technology or something unusual about the way that they have their strategy, or you're working in the science field, research, discovery, stuff like that, and the way that you would need to deal with them will also be innovative, and that's a part of your journey. Uranus in the 7th house. So people see Uranus in the 7th house, immediately they say divorce. I did have parents that were divorced, but they lived, I think, 13 years before they were divorced. So I can't guarantee that that Uranus is divorced because it is a slow-moving planet. It can cause shocking separations, but also shocking relationships, and there can be some sudden quality. But on the other hand, it can be the people that have a lot of space between them. Okay, then they live in separate houses, or the house is very technological. The living room, the 7th house is the living room. So something about the living room perhaps can be extremely spacious. Or it's a partnership house, or the partners of research. But there's something about the connection that that has to kind of stand out. It can be at the commitment type, or the type of agreement, because 7th house is agreements, like marital agreements or contracts. But it can also mean that this is a couple that steers each other up, whether it's business or marriage, that steers each other up in a certain way that causes them to liberate themselves in this connection. And there can be shocking events to the relationship. Okay, or a couple that are a couple of rebels as well. This can be with such placement. Okay, and this goes to not only synastry but also composite. In this case, it can be a couple of astrologers. It can be a couple of scientists. Okay, there's just something unusual, something or high-techy. About the way that they do the connection, and it is by necessity. Okay, there's some sort of a shocking events that they respond to in an innovative way, and they can be a couple of rebels as well. But they can also rebel each other, and there is where Uranus will keep you together for as long as you need to be together, because it will keep you together if you're more free together than apart. And then once you are, if you think about my parents, then both of them love to travel, and they, I guess, were liberated from a certain backgrounds that they were coming from, and rebelled against both the families. Okay, because they're coming from 2 different countries. And they stayed for 13 years, and then eventually they parted. And so Uranus will keep you together for as long as it's good for you. Okay, my father is not the same. After this marriage, is not the same. It's a completely different person, different beliefs. Even the place that he lives is different. Okay. My mother too. I grew up with my mother, and I have things from the culture of the father. the fatherland, that were ingrained, whether it's the love for nature or the simple life, and things that are more European than Israeli. So yeah, and so I don't want to think immediately that seventh house Uranus will be divorced, because it can also be a very long marriage that has the objective to liberate you. It will serve when it serves, but Uranus will divorce you if you are oppressing something. Okay? When it's no longer, when it's up, Uranus, even with the shock, poof, this out, no more. Let go. And Uranus in the 8th house. So, the assets that you own together with someone, business or marriage, inheritance, okay? Then maybe either you own assets to do with profits from science, from astrology, occult, even astrological magic can be involved in here. It's also energy level, the things you loan to another person and the things that you get from another person. They can be technological items, or they can be unusual means of energy sharing. You could be astrally traveling together or having shared dreams with someone. And again, it doesn't have to be romantic at all. Okay, it's just another form of communication and another form of shared energy. So this is Uranus, and it usually has a reason. Okay, either stemming from a shock or even known people that could not physically be together with the partners, but they could be astrally together with the partners. It was just so, and so they would have relationships in energy. And that is the way it was for them. Okay, this is unusual. So those things, yes, it is more a hidden type of unusual, but this is very interesting because the nature of the 8th house, which is what we swipe under the rug, and the nature of Uranus is opposite. Okay, 8th house is what we hide under the rug. Uranus, some shock happens and everything is exposed. Okay, non-volitionally, the non-volitional speech. When I wrote, when I was Me Too veteran, I wrote Sugar-Free Lemonade, the satire. It was non-volitional speech. Okay, it's kind of like there was a shock to my system, and then everything from childhood began to spill up in a Facebook satire. And I tried to shut myself up for me, but de nada. Okay, Uranus was going over my Mercury speech, so non-volitional speech. And that was how I became a Me Too veteran, basically. Or what happened following the shock of Me Too is kind of like everything from childhood became to, and from a person that would not be able to speak, I went to therapy, to psychologists, to this, to that, and I even went to EMDR because I read that the men cannot speak about their traumas, and maybe I can heal my trauma without speaking about it, because everybody wants you to speak about it, and I wasn't able to, and I didn't know even what to speak about. It was both these cases, what I knew I wasn't able to, and what I, didn't know, then of course I wasn't able to. And then, poof, everything comes out. Okay, Uranus goes across Mercury, there it was conjunct in Aries, and everybody tried to stop it, okay? Everybody tried to stop it, but there was no stopping it. It was very scary, but it needed to be released. Uranus, 8th house, can be some sort of a similar thing, and this is where it can be extremely shocking, because your entire constitution wants to swipe it under the rug, but you cannot. And it comes from either you or your partner, somebody you share energy with. And there is where things can get extremely rebellious, because you are basically rebelling against a social taboo. It doesn't have to be sexual, but can also be. And so it's not for nothing that I gave the example of Me Too. I think Rao was in Libra when I was in Me Too, when the actual stuff like happened that triggered it. Rao was in Libra. It's my 8th house. So it was the time to spill to spill the tea that I didn't even know that I had to spill. And so you could be something of a very similar nature. When it is triggered, then this can happen, and it can be a bit more difficult because the nature of the eighth house is that we tend to swipe it under the rug, and the nature of Uranus is that we spill the tea. Okay, everything is like, you think about, a person who's doing a silly walk and have to carry and is doing waitressing, so they have to carry like a hot tea, and they're going like this, and the tea is spilling everywhere. This is what it feels like to have Uranus in the eighth house. And the tea that is spilling is very, very hot and very, very burning for both the person that's spilling it and the people around. So everybody is shocked. Your inner shock becomes, you can it's also a house of projection. So unfortunately, it's one of the things that can happen, and radical acceptance is needed at every turn of the road. Okay, radical acceptance is needed at every turn of the road. Is just so. But the intention of Uranus is to liberate you. Don't hold this secret anymore. Especially if it's sexuality, okay, repressed sexuality, then it can come out as kind of a shock and release of energy, and it's like, hey, don't hold this anymore. Something happens, a shock that liberates you from a great trauma that you have been carrying inside you, and you're like not hiding anything anymore. Okay, ninth house. So ninth house Uranus. Ninth house is traveling, is higher studies. It's a worldview, religion. It's the house of God, or the lack of. And so there can be a shock to do with one of these things. Okay? That forces you to go about them differently. It can be that you want to have a jet plane that is your own because you had a bad experience with flight, but you really like to travel abroad. Okay? Or you had a bad experience in one of your religious institutions, but then you discovered another stream of religion that you actually are attracted to. Or you had a worldview that you really liked, but the guru was trying to be abrasive to you, and you had a shock, and you saw how what the guru believed in and what he did was connected. Okay, or you change your worldview due to shocking events. Traveling can be very sudden. Okay, I have another combination, which is Uranus in Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, the planet of traveling. And so my traveling experiences when I actually went abroad, I usually did not know about them too much earlier. It's like, come on, we're packing, we're going, we're leaving, we go here, we go there. And they were a highly unusual way to deal with certain things, but also I saw the world, and I'm very, very, very grateful. So that was another combination. Okay, Uranus in a planet associated with traveling, like Jupiter ruled Uranus, and so you could suddenly travel somewhere. You don't know what's happening. You go out. And that is, it could also be around your higher education. So you didn't think you were going to study, and then one sudden, you have a ninth house perfection, and you suddenly decide to study something unusual, or a certain shock that causes this, a worldview change or a change in your religion that surprises everybody, and you go about it your way. With Uranus, you can't repress anything. The more you try to repress, and again, if you're an introvert with Uranus, the more you try to repress it, the more radically it will come out. Okay, and it tends to be sudden. 10th house. So Uranus in the 10th house is also one of the relationships with, mother, father, but can be when you as a parent getting a promotion. So as what you're known to the world, okay, is your status. Also, some of your legacy. If you mean heaven is there, then it can be a legacy too. And that means that promotions can be, you might rebel and get a promotion. You might outthrow someone, okay? You might become independent and open your own venture. You might suddenly become a parent, okay? Suddenly become a parent, okay? Kind of like there's a test on the counter, next thing you know, or other cases. But if you are in a position of authority, then you would be an unusual authority. And here you have to be quite cautious because decentralization is best. You don't want to be oppressing people because the backlash would be of the Uranian. It would be shocking to you. Think about King George in the United States, okay? So people will rebel you, but you also are a rebellious person. And that depends on the sign and how is it aspected and so on and so forth. But changes to your reputation come sudden. This can also mean that your career is unusual, your environment of career is unusual. Or that you constantly rebel. You could be, I have it in Sagittarius, and you can be one of the leaders that are good leaders to revolution but need to retire afterwards. For me, it's no problem. I have Ketu and Uranus not together, but in the same house, co-present with my Meet Heaven. So I'm good for being the leader of the revolution, and later I'm retired. And I'm okay with both. But if you don't have, let's say, Ketu there, then you can be the person that constantly steers up a revolution in your workplace, or there's shocking events to your workplace, or shocking, suddenly you are fired, suddenly you move, or suddenly you're no longer satisfied with what you do. And it's just, there are more aspects to you in a very public and visible way that need to be present. If you are a parent, then, or suddenly you become a parent, or suddenly have a responsibility. Uranus is now, or was crossing my sun when suddenly I became a parent of a cat and a turtle. Okay, so suddenly I have this caregiving thing to tend to. And so responsibility can also be something that suddenly befalls you. 11th house. So 11th house is your colleagues, okay? The colleagues that you know, like the closest siblings, but the colleagues, the acquaintances. And with Uranus, you could be having acquaintances that are scientists or astrologers. They can be your allies, but they can also be your enemies. So the 11th house is not just the house of allies. It's also people who are, you know, you need to see how the ruler is aspected, but with acquaintances, you know, we argue with them. We have drama going on when it comes to 11th. Either that or I'm biased because I have Pluto transit in my 11th. But with Uranus, there is some act of rebellion that is happening. Oh, you're going to conferences. And when that's triggered, even if you are a scientist, even if you are an astrologer doing Uranus stuff, there still is drama going on. And because of a certain shock. Okay, so whether it's your social groups, the conferences, if you're doing crowdfunding with Uranus there, stability is not something that you can rely on. But it's important to understand, because if you tend to too much security and you're oppressing a certain aspect of yourself, a certain dream or agenda that you have. Okay, before I was Me Too veteran, if you told me you are a feminist, I say I'm humanist. And then one woman explained to me, but human is man. Feminist is like also a woman. Ah, okay, fine. Then personist, I don't know what to call it. I just think that all people are entitled to live good. That's the problem, okay? And then it was me that became like a very radical figure in the Me Too case in my community. I don't remember what was going through my 11th house. I just don't, yeah. But it can be something like that. You are repressing your agendas. When I was volunteering, then I was, someone who was kind of like my boss there said, oh, you are a person that has a lot of values. And I did not know what she was talking about, because I was poor, so I did not have housing. So I went to volunteer to have housing. So I didn't understand what does she want from me. She was like, you are very you know, and this was something that I was not aware of. But if you have dreams that you are repressing, you're not going after, when you have, whether it's 11th house perfection or you have transits to this Uranus, or Uranus transits your 11th, all of your dreams and goals, everything takes a halt, and all of your dreams and goals, suddenly you act on them. And it can be due to a shock, okay? It can so much be due to a shock, or it can be due to a certain shock that happens. Think about COVID. So many people reinvented themselves during COVID. I did not reinvent myself. I had some profit of a business, and then I was in between houses, had a lot of experiences, but I can't say I reinvented myself. But so many people had this, suddenly they were opening businesses, they were, they couldn't do the daytime job, and so now they had to turn their hobby into a job and to make an income with it. Or some agendas were growing around these, and it's going to be due to some certain traumatic events sometimes that you have to, the inner missionary in you comes out. And whatever is your agenda, with Uranus, this agenda is going to be unusual as well. Okay, you're going to have an unusual way to deal with things. If I think about the ruler of my 7th and 4th and the Me Too kind of like being triggered, or actually now it is being triggered by Aries, but then it was also being triggered by Uranus, then what I think about is very much pleasure culture. Okay, instead of rape culture, pleasure culture. So I began to actually work in a place that was selling workshops to how to enjoy masturbation and, communicate our desires. And it's kind of like, oh, this is the sex that I do want. Instead of like, what they did to me, I was like, oh no, I'm just going to be the romantic girl that instead of explaining what they do bad, so just write a satire about me and everything that's happening, and I'll just go to work in pleasure culture. And it had its own pros and cons, but with Uranus, it can very much be a similar thing. The way that you deal with this shock is not the usual ways because they're not open to you. Okay, think about the person that cannot communicate their trauma in a court or in a setting or in a conversation even, but has to write a publicist article about about this because that's the only way they can express themselves. You can understand that this is fated and the construct of this in society. So 11th house, very important house, the way you deal with this shock and your agenda and the way you have your own manifest will be unusual and eccentric. And it's not because you're attention seeker, it's because your entire constitution cannot do otherwise. 12th house, so last but not least. Uranus in the 12th house. So 12th house, exile, hospitalization, bedroom, retreat, jail. Okay. I met a person once that was pacifist, and she didn't want to recruit to the army, but they did recruit her, and because she was pacifist, they put her in jail. But her experience in the army jail, and her experience was, she said, I felt so free and peaceful there. I was like, and she became a very big activist because she had no problem to be in jail. She felt happy and relaxed in jail. Okay, so you could have an unusual experience in those 12 house places. And this can be a great source of power for you even. Well, it can mean sudden experiences of loss, jail time, or bedroom stuff, or even vacations, because hotel rooms are ruled by the 12th house. So you could be a person that's having unusual experiences of the 12th. If somebody sends you to exile, they think they punish you, but you find liberation there. Okay. Same with the hospital. It is just going to be something unusual, but it can also be shock in those areas. Okay, you go to hospital, there is some shock there. I don't know if Uranus was not going through my 12th house when I was, when I was at the age that something happened to me at the hospital. I was saved from that. But yeah, it was a shock. That definitely changed. my life more than I could imagine, because it seemed like, I was saved from that. It's like, you think, oh, nothing happened. But no, it was unfortunately shocking. So it can also be one of those experiences. And 12 houses, sometimes what we don't know that we don't know. So you could be even forgetting or dissociating from that. Or just not thinking that it matters so much. Okay, like in my case, I didn't think it matters so much until something happened to me in 2007. And I'm like, that invoked things that I felt when that doctor hugged me. And I'm like, why does it feel like incest? Like, it is so weird. So that was the thing. I just talk about the 12 and I have 12 house talk. So but it doesn't at all have to be anything of that kind. It can simply mean that you travel abroad and exile, you feel kind of like isolated or exiled, but you have a different, you rediscover yourself there. If I think about Gigi Young, she was a model. And then I don't remember if she was in Japan or whatnot. And she was in the apartment alone. She was waiting for a shooting and she was in the apartment alone and she was so lonely. And then she began to channel spirits. And now Gigi Young is known as a spiritual teacher that gained her knowledge before she looked into writings of anyone like Rudolf Steiner. She was literally channeling everything. And that's her source of knowledge. And she teaches people how to channel. I don't know if she still does, but that was what she was doing. Okay, so an experience of exile and loneliness can lead to some sort of a liberation where there's something in latent, even channeling or even an inventive skill that you have that you begin to develop in those situations. Or if maybe you are in jail, then you are inventing something or learning something about science or developing bombs. I don't know. Hopefully, yeah, hopefully something more of the kind to yourself and humanity. But that is what it is. So that was Uranus around the houses. I'm not going to do Uranus generations right now. But I do want to talk about just a slight word, okay? When you have Uranus transiting, okay? Then when it transits a certain house, then you just need to go over my video and look at what house it is transiting. Right now, Uranus is in Taurus. So look at where is Taurus in your natal chart and where is Venus in your natal chart. Will tell you what can you blame on Uranus. But also Uranus is not just a transit in a house, it also makes aspects to your personal planets in transit or natally. And while that deserves an episode of its own, whatever Uranus brings to your personal planets, it means that you are just doing them differently, and the level of either the shock or the way that you deal with the shock can be mitigated if it is a harmonious aspect, or if you are having transit stuff that are hard aspects, you will see that you will encounter people and circumstances in your life that carry the timestamp of the harmonious aspect to assist you with this crisis. Okay, and I've had it myself. I began to see how suddenly I would think even or do a spirit of matter episode about someone or be introduced to someone, and they would carry a certain timestamp that would trigger actually the harmonious aspect of the hard aspect I'm having between planets. So this is also something that I want you to know that is available. Uranus can be very manifesting, okay? Because setting intention with Uranus and letting go. Uranus is going to bring things about in a way, it's a bit chaotic, but setting intention and allowing things to have their silly walk around this. very innovative. And again, if you are, right now Uranus is in Taurus, it's a fixed sign. So those changes can be more difficult to integrate. And because Taurus wants peace and it wants something fixed, and that's just what you can't have. Okay, because if you're oppressing something, then you will need to tend to that, and there can be like a shock that causes you to live your life to the fullest. Basically, this is what it is about. It's all about you living your life to the fullest, and things will happen suddenly. So I can say, for example, I have a turtle I found, and the way that I discovered this turtle was I went, and it was, and some older person stops me and he say, look at this turtle, and it was standing in a crossroads. And I said, well, there is a yard where I live, so I'll take it to the yard. And I took care of it, and then there was the war. And the 7th of October. So for 2 weeks, I was not able to be at home. I called my neighbor, and one neighbor was in Jerusalem, and the other neighbor could tend to the turtle, and they helped the turtle. Today, I see this person, and he tells me that this is a female turtle. So first of all, I was assuming it's sex. And this is a female turtle, and he tells me that before he moved into this house where he lives, he used to have a turtle farm with 50 turtles. And he said, if I find more turtles, then he would love to help me, and we have a farm of turtles. So not only did I find somebody who will assist me with taking care of the turtle, I understood, I was assuming it's sex, but you see how the unusualness of the things happen, and apparently turtles are also associated with Saturn in Aquarius. I saw that by the sphere and sundry thingy. I don't know how, but this is very interesting. And so by the shock of the war, I was forced to communicate with my neighbor and to ask them if they can help me with the turtle. And this neighbor had a farm of turtles, and now he wants to have more turtles. So I will get help with caring for this turtle. Okay? And that is and Uranus is co-present with the ruler of my 6th house, which is pets. And whereas this turtle is in the yard, which is 3rd house. Okay? The sun in the 3rd house. So that is a very Uranian story. Yeah, there was a shock. The 2 weeks I was not able to go to the house and feed the turtle. And there was somebody who was taking care of this turtle, and for him it was a revivification of a dream that he used to have, and now he wants to do again. And with this tiny klein story, I will end this episode and invite you to ponder upon how those experiences, I cannot take the shock out of your system. And I cannot gaslight you that Uranus does not involve shocking events, whether in transit or in Italy or whatever it's perfected. But what I can tell you is that the essence is that something needs to be liberated. Something needs to be liberated. This is why it's also governing divorce, because when people are there with each other because they're comfortable, Uranus won't let them. And the level of unusualness is accordingly. So you can kind of, on this day, ponder about Uranus. You can do it also on a Friday because it's in Venus sign. A Friday, okay? Or a Monday night, which is Venus night. Then try to see if you can ponder about the presence of Uranus in your life. What has it been teaching you? What is it trying to liberate you from? And what is it trying to liberate within you that you are oppressing? Okay. Saturn can also have to do with gender non-conforming, whether in experience or identity. Okay, it can also have to do with that. Kind of like define the binary, kind of like a bigger Mercury in that sense. So this also has to do with those experiences. In Taurus, we are asked to embrace women with all types of genitalia, or to radically accept that for some people, being a woman means having technology associated with this. Okay, medical technology. And we must accept this, okay? We must not repress. So this is also a teaching that we get at this time. Radical acceptance. I wanted to sit with the idea of radical acceptance, and I want to tell you a little bit of a story regarding that, because when you have trauma, like CPTSD or PTSD, there are still people in mental health that don't know what is CPTSD or don't know what is trauma. What they know is a personality disorder that they call borderline or manic depressive. And if you would look at how to treat those personality disorders, basically, let's say you accept, you say, okay, I'm crazy, I have borderline, I have this, I have that. Can I go along with the stigma? Then, if you basically accept this and you see how to treat that, you will see the term radical. I hope you will still see the term radical acceptance. You can see that the key to recovering from trauma is radical acceptance of what was, of who you are, of what you did or what you had to do or what was your response. And Uranus is a planet whose teaching is radical acceptance. There was a shocking event that changed the way you are in the world. But also there are latent talents within you that could only express themselves in this way, under those conditions. If you think about disability or a certain injury, or kind of like, I would probably not decide to adopt a turtle if it was not the only way to save it that I see. And I would probably not become a mother of a cat if some cat did not sneak into the house in the middle of the night and started sleeping, purring next to me. And I realized that I'm more calm. So because I would say, how can I take care of a cat? I can barely be sure that I can feed myself, and so on and so forth. And so those events, those Uranian events, made it so that, yes, I do care for my own pets, not just as a doggy sitter, as a job. And now it is just so. Okay. So radical acceptance and understanding that those shocking things are happening, and they are, what was oppressed is being liberated, and the latent talents that you were not bringing into the world, or the things that the part of yourself needed and was not receiving, through this shock, they can have an answer in mitigation. Because in the world the way it is, I did not feel secure enough to take care of a pet. Okay, it's like I don't have enough money. I can't really change my income right now of any way that I know of, and I'm unappointable. Okay, and it's very difficult for me to ask for help because of community. I have to speak. Okay, I speak all the time here, but if I have to call you or to ask something from you, very highly unlikely that I will do that. So imagine what it was like being in between homes. So in those situations, it was highly unlikely that I will adopt my own cat. But then Uranus comes in and it's like, well, this happened. The cat adopted me. Okay, and the turtle, I had to rescue it. So I was like, but how will I feed it? Even with cucumbers or something like what it likes to eat. I was like, how will I do that? And then there was an entire war that forced me to ask somebody for help. And this somebody happened to not only know how to take care of turtles, but desire to do so, to take care of even more turtles. So I'm getting help to care for my pets. Okay, and this was Uranus kind of crossing my sun, that rules the 6th house of pets. And there are many, many, many more Uranus stories. When it comes to relationship, I have another. I think I had episodes about outer planets to inner planets, and Uranus was in that. You need to understand that the shocking situation is bearing the liberation of the repressed, whether needs that you have, or parts of your personality, or part of the life path, or something you need to do in your life that was stagnant, that was a part that you didn't believe you could do. And this is what it is about. I literally have my cat line on the Uranus caption painting, that sketch that I did for this episode. Bless you. So this is what's happening now. This is a very co-presence of Uranus and my sun in this. And yes, it is Jupiter hour, which is in between my Venus and my sun. Absolutely gorgeous. So I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.